let's start modeling our bottle here. I'm just gonna start modeling the silhouette of the bottle. I think here I'll start with a cube. Just move this image towards the center. Turning on my X-ray mode so I can see through the shape. And I'm just going to start blocking this out. When I model stuff, I like to start with less geometry in the beginning and then just sort of add more as I go. But I like to start with less like geometry in the beginning. That's just me personally. Add an edge here. Alright. So this is a very round shape, a very round bottle, so I'm just going to scale this in from the x-axis quite a bit, like so. This part is going to be round, so we'll need to circularize this or make this circular. So there's a loop tool add-on that you can enable, and to do that you have to go to Preferences, Add-ons, you have to type in loop tools and enable that, and that will allow you to enable it. And then you have to right click your mouse and go to loop tools and then click circle. And that will allow us to round out these edges here. It'll give us more circular edges. I'm just gonna kind of pull this back out though, so we can have a nice square. Want to make sure there's enough geometry before using this plugin too. So I'll add another edge loop here. And now we can do it. So I'll scale this back in slightly, and now we can select those vertices. And we can go to loop tools, and it'll create a circular type of shape for the top of our bottle here. So if we pull up some other references, we can get an idea of how thick it is. But looking at it, we know it's definitely round up here, so yeah. I'm just gonna scale it in like that. And now we can just wrap up, finish it off here by modeling the neck. Okay. So every bottle has like a cork and a top, so we'll want to model those things as well. I'm just bringing this back out slightly. I have a perfect, more rounder circle here. There we go. Okay, so let's just model the cork because every bottle has a cork. So let's model the cork. I'll just use a cylinder for that. Pretty simple. Scale that in. We're going to add some thickness to this bottle in a second as well. Give this bottle a little thickness. I'm just going to model the cork here. Give it a little geometry. Give it some edge loops. So when we subdivide it, I'll just smooth it for now, and we'll add some subdivisions to it in a second. I'm gonna name it cork, and I'll go ahead and name my cube bottle. Okay, so I'll hide the cork, and now we just need to model the top of the bottle. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I'll just use this as a base. Extrude up like so, and extrude up again. And right here it looks like there's a bit of a extra piece of detail here, or a little bit of detail there, so we can model that in as well. So to do that, I'll just add a couple edge loops here. I'll bevel it slightly, and then we can inset that and bring it in slightly like so, just to give it more detail there, because that's what it looks like on the reference there. You can see that little bit of detail there. Okay, so that's the basic silhouette for our bottle and our top. Let me go ahead and separate the top from the rest of the bottle here. So P to separate, and I'm going to click selection. That'll separate our top from the rest of the bottle. And now back to the bottle. So the bottle also has like this label on it, so I'm going to go ahead and model that now. To do that, I'll just add a couple edges here. Select these faces. This time I'll do Shift D, and then I'll do separate selection. And this will be our label for the neck. And as for the center of the bottle, you can see there's a little bit of an inset here. So we're going to want to model that too. And that's really on both sides. I'm sure this bottle has some sort of back label or something on the back, and which we would need to add. So let's do that. So I'm just going to select my bottle. I'll add a couple more edges here for extra support. I'll select these faces here. Make sure we only select the front faces. And I think before I do this though, I'm going to add more edge loops around the edge of my bottle so it's a little bit more rounder, matches up with the edges here a little bit better before we do that. Just to round things out a little bit. And then for the bottom here, I'll just either bevel or add another edge loop to give it some curvature down here. So a little round down here as well for the bottom of our bottle. So I think in this case, I'll just add some edge loops, but we're gonna go ahead and subdivide it just to see how it's looking. Before we apply that subdivision, we'll want to add this inset for this middle face here, because this is where our label is gonna go for the bottle. So I'm just gonna center this image a little bit more. And then, yeah, so this is where our label is gonna go, right about here in this area. And then we just basically want to make sure there's enough geometry to support this this shape. So actually, before I subdivide, I'll just go ahead and do this now. So I'll select these faces in the front. Make sure that before we do that, make sure everything's looking okay. It's very easy to make these type of mistakes, but when you're scaling things, you want to make sure you don't scale things incorrectly. So just make sure everything's nice and make sure the edges are flowing nicely here. There we go. All right. And now we can create that inset in the center. So to do that, again, I'm just going to select the faces in the front. Right about there. And we're going to inset them. So I'm going to press I to inset, like so. And then I'm going to go right click, loop tools, circle. And that'll give us a nice circular shape to work with. Now this mask is, or this label is kind of more oval shape, so I'm gonna scale it slightly in the z-axis to make it more oval looking. So it has like an oval shape to it, slightly. So I'm just gonna adjust it. There we go. And there is our placement for our label. That's where our label is gonna go. And on the reference, it also looks like it kind of caves in a little bit. So just to give it a little bit more extra support, I'll make another inset here. So there we go. And then I'll just slightly push it in a little. So I'll go GX to just kind of bring it in slightly like so. And there is our bottle, okay? So that's a good start. Now we're gonna start adding some subdivisions here. So let's just do that, see what it's looking like here. Looks like our cylinder has some sharp edges here that we'll need to adjust. So to fix this, we can just select these edges. I'll go loop tools again. Oops. We may need to adjust the radius of this slightly. Just kind of round that back out. There we go, like so. Now we have a perfectly round neck for our bottle. Go ahead and smooth this out, and you can see this is the start to our bottle. nice base mesh to work with. And I'll just add a couple more edges down here just to round this out a little bit more. There we go. Bring that in slightly. There we go. All right. For the neck, I do want to make the neck a little bit more thicker, so I'll just scale that out. I'll press Alt S to scale that out slightly, just to make that neck a little bit more thicker. All right. And yeah, folks, so this is the start of our bottle. Next up, we're gonna start adding some materials to it. We're gonna unwrap it, and then we'll get some materials on this, so stay tuned. Alrighty, folks, so we're gonna manage to try to make the displacement map for this bottle. So as you can see, the bottle has some interesting shapes, and we want to try to create those shapes using a displacement map. If you don't know what a displacement map is, it is a grayscale map that has white and gray values. So the white values indicate the areas that pop out or that stick out, and then the darker values represent the areas that are flat or that go in like this. So we're going to manage to try to create that for this, so that when we go back into Blender, we can import this map and it'll give us this nice shape here that we have. So let's manage to try to create that in Illustrator. So let's see. When we look at it, it has these ridges. I can't really explain the shape to you, but it's got like sort of these petal looking like ridges. So I'm just gonna manage to do it to the best of my ability. So let's see what we can do. Start with got these petal looking shapes. Let me think how I could go about doing this. So you can skip this part if you don't want to see me struggling to do this, or I may speed this up. But we're going to manage to try to create this shape here. This interesting shape. And I'm going to mirror this over so we don't have to try to make it even. So I'll duplicate it and then I'll transform, reflect it 90 degrees. Well, now we have our shape. I'll move this over. It's kind of hard to see because it disappears. Okay, now we have our shape, and we'll fill it with a white value for now. Okay, because this is the area that's going to pop out on the bottle. So yeah, scale this down a little bit, or let's scale this in. No. I think this part needs to be skinnier, and then we need to curve this part. It needs to be curved. And this section needs to be more skinnier from what it looks like. And this needs to be curved. So to curve this, I'll just select it, and then I'll click on one of these little icons here, and it'll allow me to curve it. I don't know if that, I don't have to curve the whole thing, so I'm only going to curve this part like that, and it'll allow me to curve it. Well, we can create something close to what we're seeing on the reference. And drag these in just a little, because on the reference it also kind of pokes in like this. And we'll have to adjust the may have to delete some points here. There. Delete this. Okay. And so now that we have our shape, we can click on this radial symmetry, and we can create something like this. And this is what's happening on the bottle. So this is kind of the same similar shape to what's happening. So once this displacement's finished, we're going to import this map into Blender, and we're going to place it on the bottle and see how it looks. So I'm can adjust this radial. You can add more instances, and it'll create something like this, and this is exactly what we want for that bottle. So remember, I told you the white areas represent the areas that'll pop out, and then the areas that bulge in, or the gray areas, represent the areas that'll bulge in or go in. It kind of has like this flower petal shape to it, sort of. So let's wrap this up and then we're gonna get this in the blender. Okay, now I'm just gonna give this bottle some thickness. So I'm gonna go to the add modifier and add a solidify modifier and give this bottle some thickness. So I usually go around like 0.2 or between 0.2 and 5, but we want this to be basically thick enough for the liquid to be able to go in between the bottle, because that's what we're going to create next, the liquid. So this is a very important part when making glass bottles. This is like really important. So as long as there's enough thickness for the liquid to go in between, then that's fine. I'd even say 0.1 is good enough here, as long as it's thick enough for our liquid, because that's what we're going to make next. So to do the liquid, we're just going to do Shift D again, and we'll just call this liquid. And then looking at our reference, we can see where this liquid stops, and it stops about here. So I'm gonna select my liquid and just kind of delete the faces that we don't need, or the vertices we don't need. I'll stop it around here. I'll just drag it down a little. I'll just stop it around here. And we want to make sure we can turn this solidify off for the liquid. We can keep the subdivision on, but we want to make sure the liquid is right in between the inside and the outside of the bottle. So we want to make sure that it's lining up. This is very important, because if this liquid is outside the bottle or too much inside, it just simply won't look good in the render. So we want to make sure this fits perfectly within the center, like in between the inner and outer part of the bottle. All right, so you can see it's inside, it's right in between both parts. All right, so that's good. And then I'm just gonna close off the top of it. So I'm just gonna click on these vertices. I'm gonna press F to fill in this space, and then I'm gonna press I to inset it a couple times. It's gonna follow the shape of the vertices, so we'll have to adjust it slightly. But just inset it a couple times and then just press M to merge those vertices at the center. And that'll give us our liquid. All right, so that's our liquid. And that is our bottle. All right, so last thing I'll do is make sure that this top has enough geometry here, so I'll just subdivide it a couple times here. I'll just add a couple edge loops. As for this top, We can either bevel this or we can delete this vertice and inset the face like we did with the liquid. So I'll just inset the faces a couple times. I'll inset them again a couple times. Then I'll just merge them together, merge the vertices together. And again, just make sure there's enough geometry in here for the top. You could bevel the edges too, but I find that sometimes just adding edge loops gives you more control over where you want those edges to be placed. So that's the reason we do it that way. But you can just bevel these edges as well. It's another way to add more geometry. All right, as for the bottom of it, since we can't see it, it's not really that important, but for the sake of it, I'll just extrude this in just to give it a little bit of thickness. And since the cork is going to go inside the top, then we could technically just leave this open. Since you're not going to see it, then it's not a big deal, but we could technically leave this open like so. And then as for the cork, we'll just add subdivision surface a couple times here, and that is our cork. Okay, and that's our top. Pretty simple. Just there we go. And then for the bottle, we added that solidify modifier. So now what we need to do is separate the inside faces from the outside faces. Because when we start texturing this, we don't want the inside faces to have the same textures as the outside. So that's the reason we want to separate it. So I'm gonna apply this modifier. I'm just gonna duplicate this so we have a copy. But I'm gonna apply that modifier. Make sure we're happy with the way this looks before we apply it. And then we will apply it. All right, so I'm just gonna apply that solidifier. And that's gonna create another set of faces inside the bottle. So we must separate them because when we apply our materials to the front, we don't want those materials to reflect inside the bottle. So I'm gonna mark a seam here. I'm gonna go to face select and I'm gonna select the faces that are inside the bottle. All right, so you can see inside, and then I'm gonna go to my materials, or actually I'll do the outside first. So I'll create a new material, assign it. So this will be the outer part of the bottle, but then we have to make the inner part have its own material. So select invert, and I'll assign another material to the inside of the bottle. That way, when we put our textures on the outside, they won't reflect inside the bottle. Okay, so now we're gonna create some materials and map out some textures on this. So let's move on to that. All right, so now we're going to unwrap this bottle so that we can place some textures on it. So just start with a cylindrical map. And I'll click on this little drop down and change the direction to poles. And then this is the inside of the bottle. So we'll do the same thing. Alright, so this is the inside, this is the outside. We're only going to be texturing the outside, so we'll just move that over there. Put this here for now. Alright, let's get some UVs for this label here. So for this, I'll just do a cylindrical map as well. I want to give this label some thickness to it, so to do that, I'll just solidify it. So solidify modifier, and just give it a little thickness so it has it. Just do like 0.1, add some edge loops. There we go. And then now again, I'll just do a cylindrical projection, or cylinder projection. I'll do the same thing for the top. So for the top, we'll do a cylinder projection. And then for the top of it and the bottom of it, we'll make a seam. And we'll just unwrap those faces and make sure we apply the scale. So to do that, I'm going to press Control A to apply the scale, and then we can unwrap those faces. And now we can unwrap the center again. Cylindrical projection, or okay. I'll do the same for the cork. So select the top and bottom, mark them off. Unwrap. Select the center, do a cylinder projection, and there we go. Okay, so now we have some UV maps ready to go for any texturing we may need to do for this bottle. So let's just go ahead and jump right in to that. So alright, so I'm just gonna start setting up some lighting here for our bottle and some render settings. More than likely to skip this part if you're not interested, but I'm gonna change my render engine to cycles. I'm gonna change my feature set to experimental. You'll find out why in a second. I'll change my device to GPU. I'm gonna turn off denoise. I'm gonna change my noise threshold to about 0.1. Change my max samples to 400. Depending on your computer, you know, this will depend on what you have. I find that 400 samples is just enough samples to get, you know, enough details. That's just me personally, but you know, 1,000 is pretty good, but 400 samples is usually that's what I've been using. I'm gonna go to my light paths. I'm gonna change this to about 16. Again, this is something else you can, you know, adjust based on your computer. Let's see. I'm gonna turn off this tiling. All right, so yeah, change my resolution to 3000 pixels. And now we're ready to set up our scene. So I'm gonna change my world color to black. I'm gonna go to rendered, and we're gonna add some lights in here. So I'm gonna go to light, and I'm gonna add an area light. All right, and we can just scale this up. We could change this to rectangle and scale this up quite a bit and rotate it. And just scale it in position here. change my pivot point to 3D cursor so it pivots around the cursor, like so. All right, and there is our first light. So when I light my bottles, I typically have 3 lights, but lately I've been using like 2 lights. So it really depends on how you want your scene to look. But ideally you would have your key light, then you would have your fill light, and then you would have your backlight and like your edge lighting. So that's the traditional setup, but again, it really depends on how you want your scene to look. So it's kind of something you have to just play around with, but we can adjust this power just to turn up the brightness a little of the light. I'm going to make it a little larger. I want to make sure it hits the top and the bottom of the bottle so it's fully lit. And there you have it. There's our first light. And we're ready to start adding some materials now. So biggest thing we got to do is add that displacement map we made earlier inside of Illustrator. So I want to test that out to make sure it's working properly. So I'm gonna add an image texture. I'm gonna add a displacement node. I'm gonna open up the displacement we made earlier. So let's go into here and look for it. Alright, so I just dragged and dropped the image texture in here, and this is what we made inside of Illustrator earlier. I scaled it slightly to give it more of an oval shape to match our reference, and I'm going to change the color space to non-color, okay, so it only picks up the grayscale. And I'm going to place this displacement node in here and place the color in here in the height channel. And we're gonna have to turn on some settings in order to see it. So I'm gonna go to my materials settings. I change my displacement to displacement only, and you can already start to see. All right, you can start to see some stuff happening here. Okay. So we're gonna have to place our UVs for this bottle in a certain place so it only hits this part of the bottle, So what we'll need to do is turn on our adaptive subdivision. It's gonna show it more. I'm gonna hide my label real quick. I'm gonna hide everything else and just have the bottle so we can see what's going on. Make sure we're also on the right material because it looks like we accidentally selected the inside. So I'm just gonna copy and paste these nodes because it looks like we accidentally selected the inside of the bottle. We want to paste those nodes on the outside of the bottle. All right, so now you can see it. So that's how it looks, and we want to change that to displacement only. And you can see it looks kind of crazy because we need to adjust our UVs. So I'm going to pull up the UV editor. I'm going to pull up the texture that we just imported, and I'm just going to adjust it. So this part of the bottle, we want it to be on here. So I'm just going to slightly adjust this until we get what we want. Okay. Now let me make sure this is the right. Oh, okay. This is the inside of the bottle and this is the outside. So I'm going to select these UV maps here. This is the outer. These UVs are for the outside of the bottle, and I'm just going to scale that until we get something. I'm going to turn off the repeat and just press clip. I'm going to turn the scale down. The scale is very high here, and you can already start to see our design on our bottle, and that's exactly what we want. Now, if we only want this to show up on this part of the bottle, we can do that. So it's not affecting the whole bottle, okay? Outside of us, adjusting it manually within the UV editor, we can also have it to where, it's only affecting this part of the bottle. But for now, let's just try to adjust it manually within our UV editor. So I'm just gonna drag it around until we get it where we want it to be. So I'd say somewhere around here maybe is good. Want to get it to where the center is matching with the center of our texture here. All right. And just play around with it until you can see it's affecting the neck part of the bottle. If we look at our reference, it pretty much extends up until the neck, up into the neck part of the bottle and the bottom. It doesn't go over the bottom, so we want to stop it at a certain point. But yeah, the neck, we want, that to, we don't want the neck part of the bottle to touch this texture. So let's just keep adjusting it until that happens. We may have to adjust the bottom of it so the bottom isn't, so it's not overlapping on the bottom. I'm not worried about the back. I could mirror this, so we could select mirror and it mirrors across the like axes, but I'm just gonna keep it on extend. And so yeah. So it's not, so that it's not affecting the neck, what I'll do is make another material. So what you can do is make separate materials for different parts of the bottle. So I'm going to select the neck. I'm going to make another material. I'm going to assign it. I'm going to click new. I'm going to copy and, well, once we make the glass material, we'll just copy and paste those nodes over. But we basically just separated the materials here. So this displacement is not affecting other parts of the bottle. Now it's only affecting this part, okay? We could do the same thing for the bottom as well if we don't want it to overlap. So I'm gonna select the bottom and just assign that to the bottom as well. And you can see it cuts off there. And that's exactly what we want here, okay? So we're getting somewhere. Great. So let's see here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So if we look at our reference and compare it, it looks like it is starting to match up with our bottle, and that's great. It's exactly what we want, okay? So we'll just keep adjusting this, and then I'll catch you in a second because we're gonna go ahead and finish the materials, and yeah, just stay tuned. Okay folks, so now that we've tried to adjust our displacement slightly, we now need to we can increase our viewport levels so it shows up a little bit better here. Okay, so that's how it's starting to look. I'm not too concerned about the back at the moment, but now let's go ahead and add the rest of our materials for the glass. So I usually use a light path node, a math node, a mix shader, and a transparent node. And then I use a principled BSDF, and I mix the transparent with that to create the glass material. So I'm just going to plug that in here. I'm going to change my add value to greater than. I'm going to plug this in the factor for the mix shader, and I'm going to plug my ray depth into my value. I'm going to change this to 6.5. And then I'll just plug the shader into the surface, and you can start to see how our material is looking. It's not going to show anything yet because we need to adjust the transmission. So I'm going to turn this weight up to 1. And now you can see our glass. And we can turn this roughness down to about 0.1. And that is our glass material. And we need to do the same thing for the inside as well. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste these notes. I'm going to copy. I'm going to right click to paste. And I'm just going to place that in there. And now we have a nice glass material for our bottle. Okay, so this is how it's starting to look. I do think that displacement is kind of intense again, so I'll just adjust that to like 0.1. Okay, for the displacement. All right, so now we can start adding some textures to this. So to do that, I'll just simply add an image texture. And then we'll open up our textures. Okay, so now we're going to work on our paper texture that's going to go in the center here. It kind of has like a metallic feel to it. When you look at the reference here, you can see that it has like a metallic feel to it. You probably can't see my reference, but on the reference it has that. So we're going to do that. Start with my mask. I'm going to grab a mix shader because we're going to mix our glass material with this. I'm going to plug my first mask into the factor. I'm going to plug my color in here, and we'll mix it here between the glass. Alright, you can see it masked out. It masked out, but we want it to go the other way, so I'll actually put my glass on top, and then there we go. Alright, so I'll put my glass on top, and now we're going to make a paper texture. So I imported some paper textures. You can get them from quixel.com, but that's where I got these from, and I'm just going to plug these in. So we have our color, and then we'll add our roughness. I'm going to change this to non-color. I'm going to change this to non-color as well, and just plug these in. I'm going to add a normal map. Plug this in. And there you go. And now you can see paper texture here. If you look really good, you can see it has some noise. We can adjust that accordingly. But in our reference, again, it kind of has like a metallic feel to it. So we're gonna show that off. But first, I'm just gonna slightly push this out. Okay. Alright folks, so now we're just gonna apply the rest of our materials. So we separated the neck and the bottom earlier, so I'm just gonna copy and paste the glass material we made earlier onto this material. So I'm gonna paste that there. And now we have our glass material. Okay, now we just need to work on the label that goes in the center of the bottle. So to do that, we'll just continue. So we've added our paper mask here. Okay, you can see that. Okay, you can see we've added our paper mask here. And we can just keep adjusting this until we're happy with it, but I think this is good enough for now. Okay, so now we got our paper. We're gonna add some metallic values to this because on the reference it kind of has like a metallic finish to it. So I'm gonna add some metallic values to this slightly. It's kind of hard to see it because of the roughness. Okay, now you can see it. It has a slightly metallic value, just like that. I'm just going to do the same thing I did for the first mask and just overlap them until we have our label. So add another mix shader and just keep overlapping these textures. We may have to adjust them, but that's fine. We can do that using a coordinate, a texture coordinate. So just gonna bring that up here. I'm gonna grab a mapping node, and we can adjust the position of our texture. So I'm gonna plug in my mapping node into my image texture and plug in my texture coordinate. I'm gonna choose the UV and plug it into the vector, and we can adjust where this texture will be on our bottle. So let's just do that until we're happy. Play around with the location a little bit. All right, and as you can see, our label is showing up. So I'm just going to keep adjusting this until we're happy. All right, we're getting closer. Do like 1.3 or 1.1, just until we get it right where we want it. 1.15 maybe. Okay, it's pretty good. Okay, so you can see our texture starting to show up here. All right, good. Now we're gonna add another texture. So we're just gonna keep doing the same thing, right? We're just overlapping textures until we end up with our design. Ultimately, that's what we're doing here. So it's just a lot of texture overlapping here. I'm gonna do another mix shader and do the same exact thing I just did. I'm gonna plug my color value into my factor. I'm gonna combine that first layer with the second layer, and as you can see, our second mask has showed up. Okay. This is actually the fourth mask. I'll use the third mask here instead. There we go. We want to put this on top first. I want to put this mask underneath because it's going to go underneath our design. So if it's going underneath, then it actually needs to go. It needs to go here. Then put that under there. second mask. See. Copy and paste that in there. Okay, turn off the repeat so it's not repeating. Okay, so this is gonna go underneath our label. So this should actually be the first one we add. Okay, so here's our paper. And then this is the second one. Should be the second mask we add here. So it's gonna go underneath all of the other ones. Unplug that for a second so we can see what we're doing. And I'm just gonna keep adjusting this location so we're happy. All right, so now we're just, again, putting our label on the bottle. I hope you guys are enjoying this content. All right. There we go. So it's just gonna go underneath the label, and in the reference it kind of shows up like that. It's like underneath the label. That's the way it shows up in there. So I'm just gonna scale it up. You can't see my reference, but I can pull it up somewhere on the screen for you so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just gonna keep scaling this because I want it to be like my reference. It's kind of stretching a little bit, but that's fine. All right, so now we got that. And then the reason why we want to make masks like this is so we can have more control over the colors and the materials. This is really helpful when it comes to doing work for clients and stuff, because clients may want you to make changes and iterations. So when you have masks, it's easier to do that, right? And it's nice to be able to do all that within one program, right? You don't have to go back and forth. You can just do it all within one program. So that's why making masks is so it's so cool. So that's the reason we do this. But now, again, we'll just finish plugging in the rest of our materials or our textures. There we go. And you can see our second texture has been added. And now we'll add the third one. You can use the same mapping, copy, paste. And now we'll just add another mix shader underneath and plug this in here. And just continue to repeat the process over and over until you end up with your design or whatever you're putting on your product. So it's gonna go under here. I think this needs to go, yeah, okay. So I'm just looking at my reference as I do this, but I'm gonna scale this down quite a bit. Oops. I'm gonna save my scene a couple times here. There we go. Scale this down quite a bit. Until we get it where we want it to be, it's stretching, that's fine. Don't worry about that. We just want to get it in position. I want it to be right here in the center here, where the rest of our label is. I'm just going to drag it right into position. There we go. All right, so on the reference, this part is red. So this is where things get interesting, right? Because you can change colors and stuff. And this is why having mask is so cool, right? So we can make this red. See that? Okay. We can make this part like a dark brown, right? Like the reference shows. It's like a dark brown. Okay. It's like a dark beige color, like that. And I turn off the metallic values. Okay. All right, guys, so this is what it's starting to look like. Just gonna wrap this up. Let's just finish adding more colors to our mask here. That's what it's starting to look like. Pretty simple. Next, we're gonna work on the top and the cork, and we'll import textures for the cork. The top is just like a metallic texture. We also have to work on the label, so we're gonna do the same thing we did for this part on the neck label. We'll import the mask and then, you know, add the colors. We'll do the same thing we did for the label on the bottle. As for this, I'm gonna make this like a dark brown according to my reference. Looks like it's about a dark brown. So I'm gonna make it, we could also just open up the image in here and do it, but I'm gonna make this like a dark brown. And there you have it, folks. That is how you import mask into Blender. That is how you make displacement maps for products or bottles or whatever you're trying to make. That's how simple it is, folks. So now let's move on to other parts of the bottle. Okay, folks, just continuing to wrap up the materials. I'm gonna do the top now. So for the top material, again, you can't see my reference, but the top material is just like a metallic value. So we're going to make this metallic. And then we're going to turn this roughness down quite a bit. It's very, very shiny. So I'll just turn that down quite a bit to like 0.5. This is very shiny. If we want to make this look more realistic, we can go to Quixel and find like some surfaces to add, but for now we'll leave it like that for now. Let's just go ahead and add some materials for the liquid. Okay, so this is our liquid. So for the liquid, we just simply have our roughness turned down to 0 and our transmission turned up to 1, and that's it. Okay, we want to turn our IRR to 1.3. Okay, and that's our liquid material. Pretty simple. I'm going to change the color of it to like a burnt orange. Okay, because on the reference, that's what color it is. Here's the reference. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of use my eyedropper and just drag it on there so we can get a good color or accurate color here. Let's do like a burnt orange, and as you can see, folks, there it is. I think that this value might be a little light, so I'm going to change the color of those letters Just try to match them up here. I think that's a little, turn that roughness up maybe. Just changing the color of my mask here as well. Let me see. Oh, this is a mask. No, that's the mask, okay. I'll change the color of my mask. Make it like a beige. There we go. All right. It's kind of stretching a little bit on the edges there. So I'm just gonna scale it down a little bit on the, stretching a little bit, so I'll just scale it down just a little bit. There we go. All right, folks, so this is what our label is starting to look like. This is what our bottle is starting to look like. And I'll say that I think the displacement could be a little bit better, but I think this is good. I think we have the right idea, okay? And this is just a guide, you know, this is just a guide on how to do it, you know, so you at least understand how the process works. Now we have to create the label. So this also has a label on it. Here's the reference here. So I'll just make another like metallic material for that. It's got like a metallic finish to it, like that. I'll change the color to about a gold bronze color, like that. And then we'll add our mask here. We'll add another mask here. So I'm just gonna go image, texture, open, pause. Just going to mix the shader. Scale it. You can either scale it using the mapping node, or we could scale it using the UV maps. In this case, I'll just use the UVs, and we'll just scale it until it fills up until it ends up where we want it to be, okay? I'll just drag that down a little bit, and there we go. Okay, just decided to go with this for the neck. I think it looks kind of cool. Turn off the repeat, and there you have it, folks. Okay, if we really want to get crazy with this, we could add a little bit of bump to this just to make it look a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this mask, move it down here. Okay, I'm going to make it like a dark brown color. Make it like a dark brown. And if we want to, you know, give this a little, you know, make it pop out more, and then also the label itself, let me see, has a little noise to it, does it? Yes. All right, so I'm going to use that same paper texture we used on this. So I'm just gonna kind of copy All right, I'm gonna copy this paper texture we imported earlier. I'm gonna copy this. I'll paste it inside of this material for the label. So I selected my label, paste it in there, and plug in my roughness and my normal. Okay, because it's kind of got that same metallic texture that the label has on the bottom here. All right, so now you can see the noise here. It just looks a lot more realistic, okay? And then we can add a little bit of bump to that label if we want, just to make things, you know, pop out more. So to do that, I'm gonna add a bump vector node. I'm gonna plug that into the height channel, plug in the normal, and it's just going to make, as you can see, that pop out a little bit, just to make it look, I don't know, more interesting, right? Can turn that strength down just a little, just a little bit of a bump there, you know? And then I'm gonna change the color of my top, make it like a gold color, okay? So if we look at our reference here, you can see the top is like kind of like a bronze, it's like a rolled, it's like a bronze color, right? Like that, okay? And that's all to it, folks. Just gonna slightly adjust it though, because it looks like it's kind of poking up a little bit, the top, like that. All right, but yeah, that's all to it, folks. This is the bottle. We are finished. The last thing we need to do is add some lights. So we have finished our materials and texturing. So now let's add some lights. Okay, so for the lighting, like we said earlier, the typical setup is just, you know, 3-point lighting. So key light, fill light, backlight, edge light. So we'll just kind of go with that. We'll probably adjust this quite a bit, but for the sake of the video, we'll just go with something simple here. So I'll just add a couple lights. Okay. If you have the, ideally with the lights too, you want to use gradient lights. So more simple thing to do would just be to add a gradient texture to these lights. But if you happen to know about the plugin, the light customization plugin, there's a plugin. I can leave a link to this in the description for you guys, but it allows you to have multiple lighting setups here. So it gives you some pretty cool lighting options here. So if you want this plugin, you can just grab it. I'll put it in the description for you. But to keep this simple, I'm just going to use a gradient light. So in case, you know, you don't have it, but I'll just use a gradient light. So I'm going to go ahead and make one or import. The gradient lights are pretty easy to make too. You could just make them in Photoshop. They're really simple to make. In this case, I'll actually just import a gradient light texture that I've made. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, just a flat gradient light here, gradient texture. Okay, I'm going to plug that into my emission, and you can see it's showing up here. Okay, and we can adjust this, so we can rotate this so it's facing the right position. There we go. All right, so you can see our gradient light there. The gradient lights just add more contrast to the lights. It just makes the lighting have more contrast and shadows and stuff, right? Because if we were to just stick with the flat light, the lighting would just look very flat. So having a gradient light is very nice. So okay, I'll just duplicate this so we don't have to do it twice, but that's the gradient light. All right, so just duplicate that. Oops, rotate that around our 3D cursor. And now we have nice gradient lighting here. Look at that, okay? So we have our fill light and then we have our key light, which are kind of like the main lights. So I'll just kind of scale that up, or scale these up slightly so that it's covering the entire bottle. I want to make sure the lights are wide enough to where it covers the bottle. There we go. And that's all to it, folks. It really is that simple. And now can add a backlight. So the backlight is intended to light the liquid in the bottle. I find that having just some nice edge lighting is good. Again, it really will depend on what you're trying to create, but ideally we would have a backlight here, and this will just light up the liquid. And as you can see, our liquid is being lit here. I don't like the lighting to show through the glass. Like, I only like to have it show through the liquid, like the backlight. I just think it looks more interesting. So one last thing I want to do though is add this displacement to the liquid. The reason why is because I want it to match the shape of our bottle. So ideally any liquid would fill the shape of it would fill the shape of it would just like follow the shape, right, of the surface. So I want my liquid to kind of have the same shape. So I'm going to copy and paste the displacement we used for the outside of the bottle to the liquid. So I'm going to do the same thing for the liquid. Just paste it in here, paste it in the displacement. All right, so that way the liquid has the same thing, and we have to enable it, so we got to go to displacement only. And now you can see it has that. We have to turn on adaptive subdivision, turn it up to 3. May have to adjust the scaling of it a little bit, but that's what we want to do. So it really matches with the shape. I want to make sure it's still in between the inner and outer part of the bottle. But for the most part, that's where we are. I'm just adjusting my mid-level as well. You may have to play around with these values a little bit until you get the results that you're looking for. May have to do that quite a bit. Okay. Can also adjust the lights here, add a color ramp to adjust it. But that's all to it, folks. That's all to it. It's that simple. Set up a camera. So let's add a camera. I press 0. I'm going into my toolkit here in my view settings, and I changed it to camera to view. I'm just adjusting my camera here. And now we can change the camera settings a little bit. So ideally you want to have your focal length anywhere from 85 to about 110 millimeters, depending on, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, but I like to go for about 85, anywhere from 85 to like 110 millimeters is what I go for with these. And that's all. It's finished. I want to keep setting up the lights, but that's all to it, folks. That's all to it. It's that simple. It's that easy.